Israel seems to repel American fast food chains. Starbucks, Subway, Dunkin Donuts, they've all had to call it quits there. KFC has actually tried and failed 3 times to appeal to the Israeli market. But unlike its rivals, KFC is refusing to admit defeat. In fact, the American fried chicken chain is trying again for a 4th time. The Calculist reported that KFC plans to open 100 locations within 5 years of re-entering the market. That's especially ambitious, considering that at its peak, it had just 10 restaurants in the country after spending 20 years trying to build a following. KFC started as one branch in Tel Aviv in the 1980s. It didn't last, but was revived in 1993. Ownership then changed hands again in 2003, but by 2012, Euromonitor says KFC had closed up shop for good in Israel. KFC's failure isn't all that shocking because of one simple but very big problem: its menu. Israel is a notoriously difficult market to crack because roughly 60% of the Jewish population keeps kosher, meaning they follow a set of religious laws that restrict them from eating certain foods. One of the major rules: don't mix meat and dairy products. And that happens to be the very definition of classic Kentucky Fried Chicken.
There have been all sorts of reasons that have been offered through the centuries as to why that's the case. And I think most people generally agree that milk is the substance of life. It's what all mammals suckle on when they're born, whereas meat, of course, represents death. And so perhaps the prohibition of eating milk and meat together has to do with valuing life and not mixing these tangible symbols of life and death.
To be fair, KFC did try to pivot to accommodate Israeli taste buds. Israel's Ynet News reported that food scientists in Dallas spent 2 years perfecting a formula to make its fried chicken kosher. Normally, when you make fried chicken, the process looks something like this. You dunk the chicken, scatter and bread it, seesaw it, rack it, and then fry it for 10 minutes. But kosher KFC looks more like this. Here's the stuff that changes. Instead of coating the chicken with milk powder, you use a milk-flavored soy powder as a substitute, which supposedly has the exact same flavor as the original recipe. In 2009, KFC rolled out this kosher-friendly fried chicken to try to tap into a wider clientele, but the customer base just wasn't there.
So when they became kosher in 2009, they changed it to a non-dairy, or we call it a milk alternative, soy milk. And that changed the flavoring of the coating. So again, that didn't seem to help them in the market because KFC is all about their taste.
Patrons complained the soy alternative just didn't taste as good, and that the batter didn't stick properly to the chicken.
In every household in Israel, chicken is eaten at home. It's like a staple food. So you need to really give them a good reason to go out and eat chicken, in a fast food restaurant or a fast food chain.
The year before KFC launched its kosher menu, its Israeli locations were pulling in $4.6 million. But by 2012, it was generating just $1 million, according to Euromonitor estimates.
The problem was not that the people don't like KFC. They like KFC a lot. The problem that was with KFC was that, you see, that there are some restrictions of in the product. The product in KFC is a very complicated product, and they couldn't get the product right here. So the company, Yam, did not want to. They weren't willing to compromise.
These religious dietary laws also get into the ethics of how you have to treat animals when they're alive and how they're slaughtered.
The animal should be relatively cared for. Some of the modern cattle practices, for example, raise questions for the modern thinker as to whether or not that practice can lead to a kosher slaughter. But ultimately, where the tradition lies on this at the moment, that the slaughter of the animal should be very quick.
Plus, methods to ensure that the poultry is raised and killed in accordance with kosher standards can get expensive.
Because the process by which it's slaughtered and then brought to market has more steps involved in it than what you find in the non-kosher food industry.
But other foreign chains have managed to master the kosher formula. Yum Brands owns both KFC and Pizza Hut. And unlike its sister company, Israelis love Pizza Hut. It ranks third out of all fast food options in Israel. And you'd think that a kosher version of the Big Mac would be a hard sell, but McDonald's is actually ranked number 1 in Israel, and that includes its local rivals. Branches given kosher certificates have slashed dairy from the menu and use custom blue and white signage. So KFC clearly seems to be struggling to strike the right formula for the kosher market. But when it comes to halal, or Islamic dietary laws, KFC has been met with way more success. It has nearly 1,000 halal-certified outlets across the Middle East, and it's also caught on in the Palestinian territories. KFC has 9 locations in the West Bank, and according to the New York Times, back in 2013, there was apparently an underground network that smuggled buckets of 12-piece chicken into Gaza from Egypt for a marked-up price of $27. There are certain parallels to the religious rules that govern kosher and halal dietary practices, with one very big exception: meat and dairy.
Halal in general, you don't have the issue of mixing meat with dairy. So you don't need to change the powder milk of the coating, and hence it's just about the way the product is slaughtered. The dairy factor doesn't play a role, and hence it doesn't change the flavor.
But Euromonitor tells us things may be different for KFC this time. There's currently a seismic shift underway in Israel from fine dining to fast food. There are also more international consumers to capture. Since 2000, not only have more than 30,000 Americans moved to Israel, but the country has also received an influx of Europeans, many of whom are more accustomed to Western cuisine. CNBC reached out to KFC to find out what they're planning to do differently this time around, but they're keeping their plan under wraps. For now, they just say they're very optimistic about the Israeli market and strongly believe in KFC's success there. Analysts tell us that if KFC makes a few tweaks to its menu, that could also make a big difference. So maybe fourth time will be the charm for KFC and Israel.